Hey guys, how are you? Hope you're all doing very well. This afternoon I'm going to be doing a review of a horror film from the UK. This is in the English language, released in the year 2012, directed by Paul Hyatt, and this film is called The Seasoning House. Now, The Seasoning House takes place in the Balkans, so although it is in the Balkan area, it's still spoken in the English. They've got accents. So it's in the Balkans during the time of the horrible atrocities that occurred in the war, and you've got a town that has been overrun by a militia. Now, the militia execute a lot of the people, but they take the young girls as hostage. And so they kidnap them and they take them to this house. And this is where the girls realize that they're going to be used as sex slaves. So they're basically going to offer their services, whether they like it or not, to the militia in order for, a little bit of pleasure. So the girls are drugged and they are forced to encounter these really brutish soldiers that are very rough and quite brutal with them. So one of the girls is a mute, who her mother was executed by this guy who's running the house. Actually, no, not by this guy, sorry, but another guy. But this guy running the house sees this deaf girl as different, and he doesn't want her to work as a sex slave. Basically, what she's going to do is prep the girls for their encounters. So basically, inject them with drugs, make sure the rooms are clean, make sure the girls are clean enough, and to basically make sure everything runs smoothly. So this guy who's running the house starts to develop these really awkward feelings for this girl. So the girl seems untouchable. She's not participating in these horrible things, but she starts to develop a connection with the girls, and she is starting to be haunted by what's going on. So eventually she realizes that she can basically go through the ventilation system in this very old, worn down house, and without being detected. So she goes through the ventilation, and this is where she realizes that she could do something different for these girls, help these girls, without these people knowing. So she develops a connection with this one particular girl, and a horrible thing happens which forces her to take revenge. And so this deaf girl is basically her versus the rest of them in a very tense showdown that I'm not going to give away. So if you want to know how this movie unfolds, please go out there and see this film for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now, my thoughts on The Seasoning House. It was a pretty impressive film, actually. I actually enjoyed this one. If enjoyment is the right word, I wouldn't say enjoyment's the right word, but I appreciated the film for what it was doing. And what it was doing is showing you the horrible atrocities that happen in the Balkan area without being a political film. Now, a lot of these movies tend to paint, good guys versus bad guys, label a country as good, label a country as bad. Now, to avoid getting into a political debate, I'm not going to mention any countries, and so I'm just going to say the Balkan area. And that's the beauty of the film. It doesn't go into politics. It just says this movie is set in the Balkans, and it's basically this group of militia doing horrible things to these women. But unlike other films, it doesn't mention the specific country doing the evil doings. It's basically just a militia, and that's it. So I love the fact that it prevents itself from painting it black and white. It's, the good guys versus the bad guys. The good guys have an identity and the bad guys have an identity. It's basically just how nasty the humanity can be towards each other. And the movie really paints that well. It's a very harrowing film. I thought it was a strong sense of menace, a strong sense of sadness. These girls were absolutely treated horribly. They're injected with drugs. They're basically zombies. And, they basically have their freedom torn away from them. And you hear so many stories in the Balkans during this period of, these horrible atrocities, but none of the other films really capture the horror that this movie captures. And I thought it was just a genuine extreme horror experience. It's a very, very brutal film. It's very depressing, and it doesn't pretend to be anything that it's not. And basically, the violence, it's not over the top, but it is extremely hard hitting. There were a few scenes that really took me by surprise. I love the fact that it didn't let up as far as the violence towards the sex slaves. Now, I'm not saying I'm all for, who have violence against women, and I like seeing that. I don't. But what I liked about the film is that it was showing you how harsh it was. It wasn't, sugarcoating it. It was showing you how barbaric these people were. And I think it's important that the world open their eyes to just how barbaric, these sex workers were subjected to, the brutality that they had to go through, because it happens. And if you're showing a film and you're not showing the brutality in a way that will shock the audience, I don't think it's doing it justice. It's basically saying that it's not as bad as it really was. But in this case, it does show you the horrific nature that these girls were subjected to, and I thought it was an absolutely harrowing experience. The cinematography, very dirty feeling. This house, that these girls were forced to work in was just filthy. And the girls' condition was absolutely filthy. They'd been battered, they'd been injected with heroin multiple times. So it's just a movie that will just make you want to go and have a shower after the end of it. And as I said, I appreciate the fact that this director dared to do something that was very harrowing and just shocking, because I think it does it justice. And for an audience to understand something truly, you have to be put into the front line, and that's what the movie does. Now, the runtime is very good. I thought there was a very suspenseful level. Towards the end, it does go down a theatrical kind of route, but I thought leading up to that theatrical route where the revenge takes place, I thought it was just a true horror experience, and that's something that I am, always looking for. An experience that will make me feel very uncomfortable, very dirty, and it's an experience that I don't want to experience again anytime soon. And the Seasoning House is definitely that. Now, the acting is good and bad. Now, this is where my problem with the Seasoning House lies, in the fact that they've got British actors to play these Balkan sort of characters. So they've got accents, but it takes you out of the realms of reality, because you know these people are English. And especially Sean Pertwee, who plays the bad guy. He is a very well-known English actor, and his accent was not very convincing. So I would have liked it to play into a different realm, maybe set in England in the future or something, and that way it would have been more realistic. But in this film, they're trying to play people from the Balkan area, but you can sense the English in their accent. And so, if this movie was set in the Balkans, I would have liked, actors from the Bosnia, Serbia sort of region, the Croatia region. I would have preferred that, because it would have struck me with a much more realistic approach. But the fact that these are British actors speaking with an accent, you just think to yourself, nah, I don't buy that. And it does hurt the film a little bit. But if you can kind of look past that and see the film for what it is, which is just a shocking portrait of how people are really treated, I think that it does warrant a view. And if you're not a seasoned hardcore sort of horror fan, I would still say watch it, because I think the world needs to be aware of what's going on to the full extent. Not glorified, not sugar-coated, not basically showing the film for entertainment purposes, but more a case of showing a film for what you have to survive through, just like these girls had to survive. So I thought the ending, as I said, was getting a little bit theatrical. It actually felt, at the first half of the film, it felt like a harrowing experience. But then as the movie finishes, it starts to go down a theatrical, Hollywood sort of style of film. So I thought it was a good payoff, though. The harrowing sort of aspect at the start of it, it was a good payoff to go down this revenge route. And this deaf girl and what she was capable of, I thought, shows you what the human spirit is capable of when you're backed into a corner. So it is an extremely harrowing film that is very well made. The acting is good, regardless of the fact that the accents were off. But it is a very harrowing film with a lot of suspense put into it, and I think that it's one of those films that I think is important to watch, because, as I said, it doesn't sugarcoat it, and it shows violence for what it is, which is just horrible, nasty, and sadistic stuff. So overall, for The Seasoning House, I'm going to give it 3.5 stars. I was really impressed, and I would highly recommend it. Alright guys, that's my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, keep watching movies, and I'll see you soon.